You tell people you're a survivor. You wear it like a badge of honor when you make it through another month, another bill, another crisis by the skin of your teeth. But late at night, when the house is quiet and your mind won't stop racing about tomorrow's problems, you're exhausted by your own strength. You're tired of being tired. You're tired of calling it surviving when it feels more like drowning in slow motion. I am Solomon, and I have watched empires rise and fall. I have seen the richest men become poor overnight, and I have seen the poorest rise to unimaginable wealth. But here is what I know about you, the one living on the financial edge. You are not surviving. You are sleepwalking through a life you were never meant to live. Picture this transformation. Instead of checking your bank balance with dread, you check it with calm confidence. Instead of avoiding phone calls from unknown numbers, you answer them without fear. Instead of making decisions based on what you can't afford, you make them based on what serves your purpose. This isn't fantasy. This is you reclaiming the throne you abandoned when you started reacting to life instead of creating it. Today, I'm not here to give you another list of budgeting tips that you'll forget by tomorrow. I'm here to show you how to stop being a victim of your circumstances and become the architect of your abundance. This isn't about making more money first. This is about transforming the person you are right now into someone who attracts wealth naturally, inevitably, because they think and act like wealth is their birthright. The edge you're living on isn't your address. It's not your permanent home. It's a place of transition, and every king must learn to recognize when it's time to move forward. But you have to choose to leave. You have to choose to stop making peace with panic and start making decisions from power. If you're ready to hear truths that will shake you awake and strategies that will move you from survival to sovereignty, then you need to be part of this journey. Subscribe now, because what I'm about to share isn't just another video you'll watch and forget. It's the conversation that changes everything. Number 1. The reality of living on the financial edge. You wake up every morning and the first thought that crosses your mind isn't gratitude or possibility. It's fear. Before your feet touch the floor, your mind is already calculating. How much is left in the account? What bills are due today? Which creditor might call? This is your reality, and you've learned to call it normal. But I, Solomon, tell you this. There is nothing normal about living in a cage of constant financial terror. The invisible pain of living on the financial edge goes far deeper than empty bank accounts. It lives in your chest as a permanent knot of anxiety. It shows up in your relationships when you snap at those you love because the pressure has nowhere else to go. It steals your sleep, turning your nights into marathons of worry where you recalculate the same impossible numbers over and over, hoping somehow the math will change. This pain doesn't announce itself to the world. You smile at work, you laugh at social gatherings, you pretend everything is fine, but inside, you're drowning. When your card gets declined at the grocery store, it's not just an inconvenience, it's a public declaration of your failure. The shame burns through you as you fumble for an excuse, as you pretend it's a bank error, as you feel the eyes of strangers judging your worth. You drive home in silence, your hands gripping the steering wheel, fighting back tears that have been building for months. This is what financial desperation really looks like. Not dramatic poverty, but the quiet, grinding humiliation of never having enough. Your debt has become your master, and you have become its slave. Every month, you perform the same ritual of surrender. Your paycheck arrives with promise, and within days, it's devoured by obligations you created in moments of weakness or desperation. Credit cards, loans, overdraft fees, late charges. They multiply like locusts, consuming everything in their path. You work not to build, but to feed the beast of your past mistakes, and the beast is never satisfied. Picture a man chained to a stone that grows heavier each day. No matter how hard he pulls, how fast he runs, the stone drags behind him, slowing him down, wearing him out. Eventually, he stops running. He stops trying to move forward. He accepts that this stone is his companion for life. This is what debt does to the human spirit. It doesn't just limit your money. It limits your dreams, your hope, your vision of what's possible. I have seen kingdoms rise and fall, and I tell you this, the poorest king is not the one with empty coffers, but the one who has forgotten he is a king. You have forgotten. You've been dragging this stone for so long that you've convinced yourself you were born to carry it. You measure your success not by how far you've come, but by how well you've survived another month. You celebrate making minimum payments like victories when they are merely postponements of defeat. The suffocation you feel is real. It's the sensation of being trapped in a shrinking room where the walls close in a little more each day. You can't breathe because there's no space for air, no room for dreams, no oxygen for hope. Every financial decision becomes a choice between bad and worse. Do you fix the car or pay the rent? Do you buy groceries or keep the lights on? These are not choices a free person makes. These are the desperate calculations of someone gasping for financial air. What terrifies me most is how you've learned to normalize this suffocation. You've made peace with panic. You've accepted that checking your bank balance should make your heart race. You've convinced yourself that this constant state of near drowning is just how life works for people like you. But people like you? You are not a category. You are not a demographic doomed to struggle. You are a king who has forgotten his crown. I once wrote that hope deferred makes the heart sick. Your heart is sick because you've stopped hoping for anything beyond survival. You've trained yourself to want less, to expect less, to settle for the scraps of existence while others feast at the table of abundance. This learned helplessness is more dangerous than any debt because it convinces you that your current reality is your permanent address. The edge you're living on isn't solid ground. It's a cliff that crumbles a little more each day, and you're not just standing on it. You're building your life on it, making plans on it, raising children on it. Every unexpected expense, every emergency, every small financial shock threatens to push you over. Yet, you stay, telling yourself you're resilient, you're a survivor, you're making it work. But survival is not success. Endurance is not victory. Making it through is not the same as making it out. The most tragic part of your story is not that you're struggling. It's that you've stopped believing the struggle can end. You've accepted the edge as your home when it was only meant to be a temporary stop on your journey to solid ground. The financial pressure that crushes you each day is not your destiny. It's your wake-up call. Number 2, Solomon's perspective on scarcity. I built temples that touched the heavens and ruled over wealth that made nations tremble with envy. Yet I tell you this, the greatest poverty I ever witnessed was not in empty treasuries, but in empty minds. Scarcity begins long before your bank account reaches zero. It starts the moment you stop seeking wisdom and surrender to the foolishness of living without understanding. When I declared that wisdom is more precious than rubies, I was not speaking in poetry. I was stating an economic fact. Every financial disaster I observed, every kingdom that fell from abundance to ruin, every individual who descended from prosperity to poverty, shared one common thread. They stopped learning, stopped thinking, stopped seeking the counsel that could have saved them. Wisdom is not just knowledge. Wisdom is the ability to see consequences before they arrive, to understand cause and effect, to distinguish between what glitters and what is truly gold. You live in scarcity not because the world lacks abundance, but because you lack the discernment to recognize opportunity when it stands before you. While you complain about your circumstances, others in worse situations are climbing out of their holes because they possess what you have neglected, the wisdom to see beyond their current limitations. They understand that scarcity is not a condition imposed upon them by external forces. It's a prison they can unlock from the inside. Let me tell you about the house of the fool. It's not made of inferior materials or built on poor land. The house of the fool looks impressive from the outside. It has all the modern conveniences, all the symbols of success, all the things that make neighbors envious. But inside, there's a monster that devours everything. This monster has an insatiable appetite for the fool's earnings. It eats his paycheck for breakfast, his savings for lunch, and his future for dinner. The monster's name is impulse. and it feeds on the fool's inability to distinguish between want and need, between pleasure and purpose, between immediate gratification and long-term gain. The fool earns money and immediately begins planning how to spend it. Not how to multiply it, not how to protect it, not how to make it work for him, but how to convert it as quickly as possible into things that depreciate, experiences that fade, and pleasures that leave him emptier than before. He sees his paycheck as permission to indulge rather than a tool to build. He treats his income like water in a broken bucket, wondering why he's always thirsty, while ignoring the holes he refuses to patch. I have watched this pattern destroy more lives than war, more families than plague, more dreams than death itself. The tragedy is not that these people lack money. The tragedy is that they lack the wisdom to keep what they earn, to multiply what they save, and to build something lasting with what they accumulate. They work harder and harder, earn more and more, yet somehow end up with less and less because they never learned the fundamental principle of wealth. Money is not meant to be consumed. It's meant to be commanded. Prolonged scarcity does something sinister to the human soul. It doesn't just empty your pockets, it empties your sense of worth. When you live in lack for months, then years, something inside you begins to believe you deserve the struggle. You start to think that financial stress is your natural state, that abundance is reserved for others, that you're simply not the type of person who gets to live without worry. This is the most dangerous poverty of all, the poverty of self-perception. I've seen men who once commanded armies convince themselves they're meant to beg. I've watched women who once managed households believe they're incapable of managing money. Prolonged financial struggle has a way of rewriting your story, editing out your capabilities, your intelligence, your worthiness of something better. It whispers lies that sound like truth. You're not good with money. You're not smart enough. You're not disciplined enough. You're not deserving enough. But I tell you a secret that transforms everything. Your current financial situation is not a verdict on your character. It's feedback on your choices. And choices can be changed. The moment you stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as the author of your decisions, everything shifts. The moment you trade self-pity for self-examination, scarcity begins to lose its hold on you. True wisdom recognizes that every financial crisis contains within it the seeds of financial breakthrough. Not because struggle is magical, but because struggle forced into the light reveals patterns that success often hides. When you're broke, you can't afford to lie to yourself about your spending habits. When you're desperate, you can't pretend your financial choices don't matter. When you're on the edge, every decision becomes crystal clear because the consequences are immediate and undeniable. The question is not whether you've made mistakes. The question is whether you're willing to learn from them. The question is not whether you failed. The question is whether you're ready to apply wisdom to your failure and transform it into education. The question is not whether you deserve your current situation. The question is whether you're prepared to do what it takes to deserve a better one. Scarcity taught me something prosperity never could, that every resource is precious when you understand its true value. When you have little, you learn to waste nothing. When you're forced to choose, you learn to prioritize. When you're stripped of excess, you discover what actually matters. This is why some of the wealthiest people I know are those who once had nothing. They learned to treat every dollar like it mattered, because for them, every dollar did matter. Your scarcity is not your enemy. Your ignorance of how to escape it is your enemy. Your scarcity is not your identity. Your acceptance of it as permanent is your identity. Your scarcity is not your shame. Your refusal to seek the wisdom that could end it is your shame. The moment you stop making peace with poverty and start making war on the thinking that created it, you begin your journey from the house of the fool to the palace of the wise. Number 3, the danger of living on autopilot. You wake up, check your phone, rush through the same morning routine, drive the same route to the same job, make the same financial mistakes, and wonder why your life never changes. You're not living. You're sleepwalking through an existence you never consciously chose. guided by habits you never questioned, trapped in patterns you never examined. This is the autopilot life, and it's more dangerous than any external enemy because it destroys you with your own cooperation. Living on autopilot means you've surrendered the most precious gift you possess, your power to choose. Every day, you make hundreds of decisions without deciding. You spend money without thinking, react to problems without planning, follow routines without questioning whether they serve you or sabotage you. You've become a passenger in your own life, watching your days unfold as if someone else were making the choices that determine your destiny. The autopilot life loves routine because routine requires no thought, no energy, no uncomfortable confrontation with reality. It's easier to grab the same expensive coffee every morning than to question whether that daily purchase aligns with your financial goals. It's simpler to pay bills when they arrive than to create a system that anticipates and prepares for them. It's more comfortable to complain about your situation than to take responsibility for changing it. Autopilot feeds on comfort, and comfort is the enemy of growth. I watch people live entire decades without ever stopping to ask themselves fundamental questions. What am I building? Where am I going? Why am I making these choices? What do I actually want my life to look like? They're too busy being busy, too overwhelmed by the urgent to focus on the important, too caught up in reacting to create space for reflection. They mistake motion for progress, activity for achievement, survival for success. The most insidious aspect of autopilot living is how it normalizes mediocrity. When you stop paying attention to your choices, you stop holding yourself accountable for your results. When your life runs on automatic, you start accepting whatever outcomes your unconscious habits produce. Poor financial results become just how things are. Constant stress becomes normal life. Living paycheck to paycheck becomes what everyone does. But normalizing struggle is not acceptance. It's surrender. It's the white flag of a person who has given up on the possibility that life could be different, better, more intentional. When you normalize surviving instead of thriving, you're not being realistic. You're being lazy. You're choosing the comfort of familiar dysfunction over the challenge of conscious change. Consider this. Every person living abundantly made a conscious decision to stop accepting scarcity. Every successful individual chose to interrupt their autopilot patterns and take manual control of their life. Every person who broke free from financial stress did so by first breaking free from unconscious living. They woke up from the trance of routine and took responsibility for redesigning their days, their habits, their choices. The tragedy of autopilot living is that it's completely unnecessary. You have the power to wake up at any moment. You have the ability to stop, look around, and ask, how did I get here? What choices led to this situation? What patterns am I repeating that aren't serving me? But most people never ask these questions because they're afraid of the answers. They're terrified of discovering that their current situation is not the result of bad luck or external circumstances, but the natural consequence of unconscious choices repeated over time. Let me paint you a picture of what conscious living looks like. Every morning, instead of rushing into reactivity, you pause. You review your priorities. You examine your calendar not just to see what you have to do, but to ensure that what you're doing aligns with where you want to go. Every financial decision, no matter how small, gets filtered through your larger goals. Every habit gets evaluated. Does this serve my future self or satisfy my present impulses? Conscious living means you stop making decisions based on how you feel in the moment and start making them based on the life you're trying to create. It means you interrupt the automatic pattern of spend first, worry later, and replace it with plan first, spend second. It means you stop letting your emotions drive your financial choices and start letting your values guide them. The person living consciously doesn't avoid problems. They anticipate them. They don't just react to financial emergencies. They create systems that prevent them. They don't hope things will get better. They take specific actions designed to make things better. They understand that hope without strategy is just wishful thinking. And wishful thinking is a luxury they can't afford. I'm not asking you to become perfect overnight. I'm asking you to become conscious today. Start by noticing your patterns. Where does your money actually go? What decisions do you make without thinking? What routines have you never questioned? What aspects of your life are running on autopilot that should be under your direct command? The moment you shift from unconscious reaction to conscious creation, everything changes. Not because the external world suddenly becomes easier, but because you become more intentional about how you navigate it. You stop being a victim of your habits and start being the architect of your habits. You stop accepting whatever life gives you and start creating the life you actually want. The edge you're living on is not the result of bad luck. It's the natural destination of unconscious choices. The moment you wake up and take control, you begin your journey away from the edge towards solid ground. But you have to choose to wake up. No one can do that for you. Number 4. A call to clarity and purpose. Stop. Right now as you hear these words, I need you to truly stop. Not just your body, but your mind. Stop the mental noise, the endless loop of worry and calculation, the constant buzz of distraction that has been drowning out the voice of wisdom within you. Stop running from one financial crisis to the next, long enough to ask yourself the question that could change everything. Why do you keep ending up here? You've been moving so fast, reacting so quickly, putting out so many fires that you've never paused to examine why the fires keep starting. You've been so busy surviving that you've forgotten to live with intention. This perpetual motion isn't progress. It's panic disguised as productivity. And until you stop long enough to understand the patterns that brought you to this place, you'll keep returning to this place, no matter how hard you work to escape it. Clarity begins in silence. Not the silence of giving up, but the silence of listening. In the quiet space between your racing thoughts and urgent reactions, wisdom speaks. But wisdom speaks softly, and you've been living so loudly that you can't hear its voice. This is why I commanded you to stop, because the answers you need aren't in the noise of your daily chaos. They're in the stillness of honest self-examination. When you finally stop moving, stop reacting, stop pretending everything is under control, you can begin to see the truth. The truth about how you got here. The truth about the choices you made that seemed insignificant at the time but compounded into your current crisis. The truth about the lies you've been telling yourself to avoid taking responsibility for your situation. This truth might be uncomfortable, but it's also liberating, because you cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. Look at your patterns with the eyes of a detective investigating your own life. When do you make your worst financial decisions? What emotions trigger your most destructive spending? What stories do you tell yourself to justify choices that sabotage your future? What excuses have become so familiar that you no longer recognize them as excuses? This investigation isn't about judgment. It's about understanding. You cannot solve a problem you don't fully comprehend. Most people avoid this level of self-examination because they're afraid of what they might discover. They're terrified of confronting the possibility that their current situation is not the result of external forces beyond their control, but the natural consequence of internal choices they've been making unconsciously. They'd rather stay trapped in familiar suffering than face the uncomfortable truth that could set them free. But I tell you this, the same power that created your current situation can create a different one. The same decision-making ability that led you to the edge can lead you to solid ground. The same intelligence that got you into this mess can get you out of it. But first, you must reclaim that power from the unconscious habits and automatic reactions that have been running your life without your permission. Purpose is not a luxury reserved for those who have their finances figured out. Purpose is the foundation upon which all lasting financial stability is built. When you don't know why you're working, any job will do. When you don't know what you're building toward, any expenditure seems reasonable. When you don't have a clear vision of where you're going, any path feels acceptable. This lack of purpose is why you keep making decisions that feel right in the moment but wrong in retrospect. Starting with intention means starting with answers to fundamental questions. What kind of life do I actually want to create? What values do I want my financial choices to reflect? What legacy do I want to build? What does financial freedom look like for me specifically, not in general terms borrowed from others? These questions seem simple, but most people have never seriously considered them. They're too busy reacting to create space for reflection. Every king needs a kingdom to rule, a territory to govern, a realm to develop. Your kingdom is your life, and your life includes your finances. But you cannot rule what you do not understand, and you cannot govern what you do not monitor, and you cannot develop what you do not plan. Too many people abdicate their throne and then wonder why their kingdom falls into chaos. The king within you has been sleeping, while the fool has been making decisions. The king is the part of you that thinks long-term, that considers consequences, that makes choices based on principles rather than impulses. The king is wise, disciplined, purposeful. The fool is reactive, impulsive, driven by immediate gratification. The king builds, the fool consumes. The king plans, the fool hopes. The king takes responsibility. The fool blames circumstances. Awakening the king within you starts with a declaration. I will no longer accept unconscious living as my normal state. I will no longer make financial decisions based on emotions or impulses. I will no longer react to my circumstances without first consulting my values and my goals. I will no longer surrender my power to choose to the comfort of familiar habits that don't serve me. This awakening is not a one-time event. It's a daily choice to live with intention rather than react with impulse. It's the decision to pause before every significant choice and ask, does this align with who I'm becoming, or does it reinforce who I've been? Does this move me toward my goals or away from them? Does this reflect my values or contradict them? The clarity you seek is not hiding from you. It's waiting for you to create the space where it can emerge. The purpose you need is not somewhere else. It's within you, buried under layers of reaction and survival thinking. The king you must become is not a distant dream. It's your true identity, obscured by the fog of unconscious living. Stop, listen, and reclaim your throne. Number 5. Practical changes with spiritual meaning. Every dollar that leaves your hand without your conscious permission is not just money wasted. It's power surrendered. It's authority abdicated. It's the difference between ruling your resources and being ruled by your impulses. When I tell you to cut the hidden financial leaks in your life, I'm not just talking about budgeting. I'm talking about reclaiming your sovereignty over the resources entrusted to your care. Walk through your financial life like a king inspecting his territory. Every subscription you forgot you had, every automatic payment you stopped questioning, every small recurring charge you ignore because it seems insignificant. These are not minor inconveniences. They are holes in your armor, cracks in your foundation, evidence that you've been sleepwalking through one of the most important aspects of your existence. A king who doesn't know where his treasury is being depleted is a king who won't remain a king for long. I've seen empires fall not through great disasters, but through 1,000 small acts of negligence. The mighty oak doesn't fall from one storm, but from the accumulation of tiny damages over time. Your financial life operates by the same principle. Those $5 subscriptions you don't use, those $10 convenience purchases you make without thinking, those $20 impulse buys that seem harmless in isolation. They don't just add up, they multiply, they compound. They create the difference between scarcity and abundance. But cutting these leaks is about more than mathematics. It's about developing the spiritual discipline of stewardship. When you take control of every dollar, you're not being cheap or restrictive. You're being responsible to the future version of yourself who will benefit from today's restraint. You're practicing the sacred art of delayed gratification, the foundation of all lasting wealth, the cornerstone of all meaningful achievement. The ability to say no to what doesn't serve you is the same ability that allows you to say yes to what does. Every unnecessary purchase you avoid creates space for a necessary investment. Every impulse you resist strengthens your capacity to make choices based on wisdom rather than emotion. Every moment you pause before spending is a moment you exercise your power to shape your destiny rather than submit to your desires. Most people think saying no is about deprivation. They see budgeting as punishment, restraint as suffering, discipline as the enemy of joy. But I tell you, the opposite is true. The person who cannot say no to minor temptations becomes enslaved to major problems. The person who cannot delay small gratifications cannot achieve large goals. The person who says yes to everything that feels good in the moment says no to everything that could be great in the future. When you learn to refuse what only feeds your ego or satisfies a fleeting desire, you're not just saving money, you're building character. You're developing the internal strength that separates kings from subjects, leaders from followers, creators from consumers. Every time you choose long-term benefit over short-term pleasure, you're voting for the person you're becoming, rather than remaining loyal to the person you've been. Consider the spiritual significance of negotiation. When you ask for a better price, request a payment plan, seek to restructure a debt, you're not begging. You're engaging in the ancient art of commerce, the fundamental exchange that has built civilizations and created prosperity since the beginning of time. But negotiation requires something many people have lost: the courage to advocate for themselves and the humility to acknowledge that they need help. Negotiation is the meeting place between pride and pragmatism. It requires you to set aside the ego that says, "I shouldn't have to ask for help," and embrace the wisdom that says, asking for help is how problems get solved. It demands that you abandon the shame that whispers, "I'm not worthy of better terms," and accept the truth that says, "I have value to offer in this exchange." Every successful negotiation, no matter how small, builds your confidence and expands your sense of what's possible. When you successfully negotiate a lower phone bill, you don't just save money. You prove to yourself that your situation is not fixed, that your circumstances can be improved, that you have more power than you realized. This psychological shift is worth more than the dollar saved, because it changes how you see yourself in relationship to your challenges. The pursuit of wisdom requires the humility to admit what you don't know and the courage to seek counsel from those who do know. In a culture that celebrates independence and self-reliance, asking for advice can feel like weakness. But I tell you that the strongest people are those who understand the limits of their own knowledge and actively seek to expand those limits through the wisdom of others. When you humble yourself to learn from someone who has successfully navigated the challenges you're facing, you're not admitting defeat. You're demonstrating the intelligence to recognize that your current knowledge produced your current results. And if you want different results, you need different knowledge. This is not failure. This is strategy. Reading books about money, attending seminars about wealth building, seeking mentorship from those who have achieved what you desire. These activities are not just educational, they're transformational. They expose you to ways of thinking you haven't considered, strategies you haven't attempted, possibilities you haven't imagined. They crack open the shell of your limited perspective and invite you into a larger understanding of what's possible. But seeking wisdom requires more than just consuming information. It requires the discipline to apply what you learn, the patience to trust processes that unfold slowly, the faith to believe that small changes compounded over time create massive transformations. Knowledge without application is just entertainment. Wisdom without action is just philosophy. Understanding without implementation is just procrastination disguised as progress. Every practical step you take toward financial health is simultaneously a spiritual step toward personal sovereignty. Every dollar you control consciously is a dollar that serves your higher purpose rather than your lower impulses. Every choice you make from wisdom rather than emotion is a choice that builds the person you're becoming rather than reinforces the person you've been. This is not just about money. This is about the kind of person you choose to be. Number 6. Examples in confrontation that lead to change. Let me tell you about the mirror that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The mirror of radical honesty about how they arrived at their current situation. You want examples? Look at your bank statements from the last 6 months. Not the sanitized version you tell yourself about where your money goes, but the brutal, unedited truth of every transaction, every impulse purchase, every choice that seemed reasonable at the time but catastrophic in retrospect. I see you cringe at the suggestion because you know what you'll find. You'll find the recurring subscriptions you forgot to cancel, the dining out expenses that cost more than groceries, the convenience purchases that added up to inconvenient debt, the emotional spending that felt therapeutic in the moment but created anxiety for months afterward. You'll find proof that your current financial crisis is not the result of external circumstances beyond your control, but the natural consequence of internal choices you made repeatedly. This is not condemnation, this is liberation. Because the same power that created your current situation through unconscious choices can create a different situation through conscious ones. But first, you must face the truth, without the protective shield of excuses, without the comfortable blanket of blame, without the familiar narrative that casts you as the victim of circumstances rather than the author of choices. The person who refuses to examine their patterns is doomed to repeat them. The person who cannot acknowledge their mistakes is sentenced to make them again. The person who will not take responsibility for their current situation has already guaranteed that their future situation will be more of the same. This is not cruelty. This is causality. This is how the universe works. You've been broke with $1,000, and you've been broke with $10,000. The amount wasn't the problem. The person managing the amount was the problem. You've received raises that disappeared into lifestyle inflation, bonuses that evaporated into impulse purchases, windfalls that somehow left you no better off than before. This pattern will continue until you address not just your financial behavior, but the thinking that drives your financial behavior. But here's what gives me hope for you. You don't need much to start over. You don't need a perfect credit score, a high-paying job, or a large savings account. You need something far more valuable and far more accessible: the willingness to start where you are with what you have and build from there. The person who can organize $50 wisely will eventually be trusted with $50,000. The person who wastes $50,000 will find a way to waste $50 million. I've watched people transform their entire financial trajectory with nothing more than a notebook, a pen, and the determination to track every dollar. I've seen individuals break free from decades of financial chaos by implementing systems so simple a child could follow them. I've witnessed people escape the edge not through dramatic increases in income, but through modest improvements in awareness, small enhancements in discipline, tiny adjustments in priority that compounded into massive changes over time. The strategy is not complicated, but it is demanding. It requires you to treat every financial decision, no matter how small, as if it matters, because it does matter. Every dollar you spend unconsciously is a vote for unconscious living. Every dollar you spend intentionally is a vote for the person you're becoming. Every choice you make from wisdom, rather than impulse, is a choice that builds strength rather than weakness. Start by tracking everything, not judging, just observing. Where does your money actually go? Not where you think it goes, not where you wish it went, but where it actually goes. This simple act of awareness will reveal patterns you didn't know existed, leaks you didn't know were draining you, opportunities you didn't know were available. Awareness is the first step toward change, because you cannot change what you refuse to see. Next, create categories for your spending that reflect your values rather than your impulses. Money for survival needs, money for future security, money for present enjoyment, money for growth and education, money for generosity and impact. When every dollar has a predetermined purpose, every spending decision becomes a question. Does this align with my stated values or contradict them? Then implement the pause. Before every non-essential purchase, especially those driven by emotion, create space between the impulse and the action. Ask yourself, am I buying this because I need it or because I feel something? Am I purchasing this because it serves my goals or because it satisfies my mood? Will I be glad I made this choice tomorrow, next week, next month? This pause doesn't eliminate spending. It eliminates unconscious spending. The The truth you must face is this: your current financial situation is not happening to you. It's being created by you through the accumulated effect of thousands of choices made over months and years. This is actually good news, because it means you have the power to create a different situation by making different choices. But you must be willing to make them consistently, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. The edge is not your destination. The edge is your warning. It's your feedback system telling you that your current approach isn't working, that your current patterns aren't serving you, that your current choices aren't aligned with your stated desires. Some people heed the warning and change course. Others ignore it and wonder why their situation never improves. The choice, as always, is yours. Number 7. The edge as a warning, not a sentence. The edge where you stand today, trembling with financial fear and uncertainty, is not your address. It's not your zip code, your permanent residence, or your final destination. The edge is a place of transition, a moment of choice, a crossroads where you must decide whether you will step forward into the life you were meant to live or step backward into the familiar comfort of struggle and complaint. I do not condemn you for standing on this edge. I do not judge you for the choices that brought you here. I do not shame you for the patterns that have kept you here. But I will not lie to you about what staying here means. Staying on the edge is choosing stagnation. It's choosing to remain a victim of circumstances rather than becoming a victor over them. It's choosing the known pain of familiar struggle over the unknown challenge of necessary growth. You have confused surviving with living, enduring with thriving, making it through with making it out. You've turned temporary hardship into permanent identity. You've made peace with panic and called it resilience. You've normalized chaos and called it normal life. But this is not who you are. This is simply where you are. And where you are can change the moment you decide to change it. The throne I speak of is not a physical seat of power. It's the recognition of your own authority over your choices, your responsibility for your outcomes, your capacity to create rather than merely react. You abandoned this throne the day you decided that your circumstances were stronger than your choices, that your situation was more powerful than your decisions, that your problems were more real than your possibilities. But the throne remains empty, waiting for your return. It has not been given to someone else. It has not been destroyed or removed. It sits vacant, gathering dust, while you wander in the wilderness of victimhood, convinced that someone else must rescue you, that some external change must occur, that some miracle must happen before you can reclaim your rightful place as the ruler of your own existence. Taking back your throne means taking back responsibility for every area of your life that has been running on autopilot. It means looking at your financial situation not as something that happened to you, but as something you participated in creating. It means examining your choices not to condemn yourself, but to understand how different choices might produce different results. The king within you does not make excuses. The king does not blame circumstances. The king does not wait for permission to begin ruling. The king sees a problem and creates a solution. The king faces a challenge and develops a strategy. The king encounters an obstacle and finds a way around it, over it, or through it. This is not about perfection. This is about taking command. Every day you remain on the edge by choice rather than by circumstance is a day you choose weakness over strength, reaction over creation, survival over sovereignty. I'm not minimizing the real challenges you face. I'm not pretending that willpower alone can solve complex problems. I'm saying that nothing can be solved until you stop seeing yourself as powerless to change it. The edge is uncomfortable by design. It's supposed to motivate you to move. It's supposed to create urgency. It's supposed to make staying where you are more painful than the effort required to go somewhere else. The edge is not your punishment. It's your motivation. It's not your prison. It's your launching pad, but you must choose to launch. I have seen people transform their entire existence from this exact spot where you stand. I have watched individuals go from the edge of financial disaster to the center of financial stability. I have witnessed people evolve from the victim of their circumstances to the architect of their destiny. But in every case, without exception, the transformation began with a decision to stop accepting their current situation as their permanent reality. The path forward is not complicated, but it is demanding. It requires you to become a person who makes decisions based on long-term consequences rather than short-term feelings. It requires you to develop systems that support your goals rather than habits that sabotage them. It requires you to seek wisdom from those who have traveled the path you want to walk rather than taking advice from those who are lost in the same wilderness where you've been wandering. You cannot think your way out of problems you behaved your way into. You cannot hope your way out of situations you chose your way into. You cannot wish your way out of circumstances you created through action or inaction. You must behave differently, choose differently, act differently. This is not about becoming a different person. This is about becoming the person you already are beneath the layers of fear, limitation, and learned helplessness. The edge where you stand is sacred ground. It's the place where transformation becomes possible because comfort becomes impossible. It's the place where growth becomes necessary because staying the same becomes unbearable. It's the place where you discover who you really are because who you pretend to be can no longer sustain you. Step forward not because the path is easy, but because remaining where you are has become harder than the challenge of change. Step forward not because you're guaranteed success, but because you're guaranteed failure if you stay. Step forward not because you feel ready, but because readiness is a luxury you can no longer afford. The edge is not your home. It never was. It was always meant to be your departure point, your launching pad, your last stop before you reclaim the life you were meant to live. The only question remaining is whether you will step forward into that life or continue to stand at the edge, looking at it from a distance, convincing yourself that it's meant for someone else. There is a moment in every transformation when the old self looks back at the edge where it once stood and marvels at how small that crisis appears from the solid ground of wisdom. But that moment is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of true understanding. Because once you taste the freedom that comes from conscious living, once you experience the peace that follows purposeful choices, once you feel the strength that grows from financial sovereignty, you realize something profound. This was never about money. This was about remembering who you are beneath the fear. This was about awakening the part of you that was born to rule, not to survive. This was about discovering that the same intelligence that created every challenge in your life possesses the power to create every solution. The edge taught you something that comfort never could, that you are far stronger than your circumstances, far wiser than your mistakes, far more capable than your current situation suggests. Every morning now becomes a choice between the king and the victim. Every financial decision becomes a vote for the future you're creating or the past you're perpetuating. Every moment of clarity becomes a step further away from the edge and deeper into the territory you were always meant to govern. This is not a destination you arrive at once and remain. This is a way of being you choose again and again. The wisdom we've explored together is not meant to be consumed and forgotten. It's meant to be lived and shared, practiced and refined, embodied and expressed. If these truths have stirred something within you, if this ancient wisdom has awakened the king you've kept sleeping, then you belong among those who understand that transformation is not an event but a practice. Join those who have chosen to live consciously by subscribing to this deeper conversation. Because the journey from the edge to the throne is one that requires both solitude and community, both inner work and outer guidance. The king within you has been awakened, but kings grow stronger in the company of other kings. You were never meant to live on the edge. You were meant to rule from the center of your own carefully constructed kingdom, and that kingdom awaits your return.